Have you ever been scrolling on your phone, just flipping through videos or posts, and then you look up and 20 minutes have vanished? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. It really feels like our ability to just sit and focus is getting shorter and shorter. But is social media really the villain here? That's the big question. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into the actual research to see what's going on. Okay, so let's just kick things off with a number that is pretty staggering. According to research from Dr. Gloria Mark, back in 2004, the average person would focus on one screen for about 2.5 minutes. Makes sense. But today, that number has absolutely plummeted to just 47 seconds. I mean, that's a huge drop, and it's the kind of thing that makes you stop and think, right? It really paints a picture of our hyper-distracted world. But hang on, is it really that simple? Is it just that our brains are getting worse at focusing? Or is there something a little more complicated, a little more nuanced, going on beneath the surface? That's the real question we're going to try to answer here. Because it's not just about a scary number, it's about understanding what's actually changing in the way our minds work. So before we can even talk about whether our attention is being destroyed, we kind of need to agree on what attention even is. It's a word we all use, but scientifically speaking, it's not just one thing. So let's break it down and get a clear baseline. Okay, so at its most basic level, your attention span is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the amount of time you can really truly concentrate on a single task before your mind starts to wander or you get pulled away by, a notification or a random thought. It's about how long your brain can stay locked in. And here's the really crucial part. Attention isn't just one big bucket of focus. Researchers think of it more like a toolkit. You've got sustained attention, which is that deep focus, like when you're reading a book. Then there's selective attention, which is like your brain's bouncer, filtering out all the noise so you can focus. And then there's divided attention. That's your brain trying to multitask. And the big issue today is that our digital lives are constantly demanding more and more of that divided, switchy kind of attention. All right, so now that we're all on the same page, what does the actual evidence say? What have scientists found when they've looked at the connection between our phones and our focus? Well, it turns out it's not just a simple cause and effect story. And get this idea, this fear, it's not new. This quote is from Herbert Simon, a Nobel laureate, and he said it all the way back in 1977. That's long before the internet was in our pockets. So this concern that just having too much stuff to look at could overwhelm our brains has been around for a very, very long time. But here's the twist. The latest research shows that it's not as simple as the internet just doing this to us. The relationship is way more complicated than that. It's not a one-way attack, it's more like a feedback loop. And this idea of a vicious cycle really captures what researchers are finding. A major study that followed adolescents over time found this exact pattern. So here's how it works. If someone already has some attention problems, that can make them more likely to use the internet in a problematic, almost addictive way. And then that problematic internet use can circle back and make their original attention problems even worse. It's a loop where each problem feeds the other one. Okay, so we can see the pattern in our behavior, but what's actually happening inside our brains? Let's zoom in a bit and look at the biology of how these digital habits might be physically changing things up there. And the key concept, the one that makes all this possible, is something called neuroplasticity. It's this incredible and frankly kind of wild idea that our brain isn't fixed. It can literally reorganize itself based on our experiences. It's how we learn things, right? But it also means that our repeated habits, like constantly scrolling and switching tasks, are carving new pathways in our brain, making it better at, constantly scrolling and switching tasks. And when scientists have used brain imaging, they've actually started to see some of these changes. In people with really heavy digital media use, they've observed things like less gray matter, that's the brain's processing centers, in areas that help control emotions. They've also seen weaker connections in the white matter, which is like the brain's communication network. And maybe most importantly, they've seen changes in our reward circuits, which explains why that little buzz from a notification can feel so hard to ignore. Now, I know all of that sounds pretty intense, but it is so important that we're clear about the limits of this research. Science is a process, and there are still huge, important questions that we just don't have the final answers to yet. And this brings us to probably the most important distinction in all of science: correlation versus causation. We can see a correlation. These two things are happening together. Problematic internet use and attention issues, they definitely show up in the same place. But proving that one thing causes the other, that is so much harder. There could be tons of other factors in the mix, like sleep, genetics, you name it. And that's exactly why most scientists in this field will tell you the research is mixed and nuanced. So instead of saying social media causes something like ADHD, a more careful way to put it, based on the evidence we have now, is that it might exacerbate the symptoms. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire that was already smoldering, rather than being the spark that started. So, where does all this leave us? Well, it leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. Maybe the most important question isn't just about what technology is passively doing to us. Maybe the real question is an active one. In this world that is literally designed to distract us, what do we choose to do with our own amazing, finite, and truly precious attention? That's the real challenge.